Let's go ahead and kick off here. I just want to say thanks everybody for joining. We're super excited to be chatting with you today. Chris and Dave and I are all warming our hands close to our the fireside here in our fireside chat. So let's take a moment just to introduce ourselves. I'll go first. I'm Elizabeth Redmond from R0. I'm director of sales of our building intelligence side of the business. So I cover everything from sensors to energy efficiency and building automation integrations and a number of solution elements around that. Chris,
Great.
you want to go?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Chris Clark. I'm probably familiar to many of the folks on the call today, but I'm the Director of Operations for the technology team at One Workplace.
Hi, I'm Dave Bryant. I'm Vice President at One Workplace. I am responsible for a lot of our business here in the California market and super excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thanks for joining us. And really, what we're doing today is talking about the convergence of data and design and how those two work together to create high performing spaces. And just a little background on our relationship. R0 and One Workplace have been working together with kind of a go to market plan with our customers. We've worked on the solutioning side, and that's where Chris comes into play. And then also on supporting customers and accessing more data to make more informed decisions. So R0 is pretty acutely focused on the data element, the automations element associated with data. We have One Workplace pretty acutely focused on the design. It's always exciting when you have two organizations who identify an opportunity together and are able to bring that to market and bring that to customers to create more value. One piece of content that we just recently released as a organization from R0 is called our Building Intelligence Index. And this is covering four major pillars where we're looking at occupancy information, indoor air quality data, energy use around energy efficiency primarily. And indoor health relates back to the air quality as well as environmental comfort. One super interesting piece and probably relevant to most of the people here on the call is we've been running benchmark data, looking at our historical data over the last so many years, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and really trying to compare that and spotting trends across occupancy within the office. So interestingly, what up here is utilization pre-pandemic, utilization now just going into or coming out of Q1 2024. So really not actually that much of a difference, but when we look at the difference in the spread across space type, there are some interesting trends where workstations, utilization at workstations was pretty excessively low and is starting to trend up in 2024. What's not expressly highlighted in the office and focus category is that focus space like phone rooms has been outperforming any other space type in the last couple of years. And we're starting to see that shift a little bit as well, where we're seeing more activity in the meeting room and the collaborative category. So you can see collaborative trending up and meeting trending up as well. And so this is all exciting. And this is data that's really helping us inform for customers and exactly where we're focused with One Workplace. So, with all that being said, I'm going to prompt a couple questions here for Chris and Dave to help us dive into how their customers and how the market's using data and design to drive. So, what I'd like to ask first is just high level, what are you seeing as trends in terms of your customers using data to implement better processes with when they engage One Workplace?
Dave?
Who you want to start? You want me to start?
Sure.
I would say, yeah, thank you. I think one of the trends is that the data is paralyzing most of them, which could be a non-trend in that I think a lot of customers have data. I think overwhelmingly we hear a lot of them not knowing what to do with it and how to translate it. And so I think there are a lot of great data sources out there. There's potentially great dashboards like what you just showed, but then so what? What do I do with the data? And I think we're waiting for some of our what I would call best in class customers to start to make decisions based on the data. And we're being increasingly asked to come in and help them translate the data into what does that mean. A lot of our customers are based on the West Coast. They certainly have offices all over the US and the world. And I think depending on the market that they're in, the data changes because of geopolitical issues that are in those markets, or just kind of, some markets never were impacted by the pandemic at all. They never really worked from home. And a lot of markets, it's still slow to recover. So I think when the data is all over the place for companies who are trying to make centralized decisions, and you've got different data for different parts of the country, and you have to make decisions holistically, it becomes really hard to implement, and certainly drives down efficiency. But I think there's a hunger for data translation and analysis, and making that translate into something that impacts real people and how they work and their experience at work, which is, I would say, another trend outside of the trend that they don't know what to do with the data, is the desire to have a really strong employee experience, and knowing how to track that, and knowing if they're making the right decisions or not.
Yeah, and aside from the benefit of having an SME provide some experience or some relational experience around how to interpret the data, it's also how the data is presented. In the past, some of the intelligence layers or dashboards that were available to the customers were somewhat pre-designed and or pre-configured to support the designers or the original algorithm experts requirements, rather than actually it being a outcome of a consultative effort with the end user. And I think what's
Mm.
unique to R0 and some of the other more recent technologies that we've deployed is there's been a lot of attention around engaging the customer base around what that dashboard should look like and how the data is presented, so that once you get through the actual initial tutorial, so to speak, that you'll be able to then understand all of the aggregate information, how to interpret it in the long term, and obviously train users to acclimate to said intelligence layer moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great point, and something that we hear very frequently as well. Is it's excellent to have dashboards and data, but we need to put this into process, whether that be a monthly cadence and deriving insights out of that on a monthly cadence so that we can create a process around it. Some of the really interesting examples that we're seeing is looking at data points and correlations as it relates to both occupancy and air quality measurement. Is there, how many of each space type do we need by capacity? Is natural light impacting productivity? Is CO2 overloaded in some rooms where occupancy is 100% or more? And some of these questions can really easily be answered, but you may get lost in the data when you go to a dashboard. So defining those questions up front and starting with use cases like that and simple problems that you have that you might need to solve is kind of really where we're able to have great success right now. What I'd like to ask next is, what are the common challenges and questions that you hear from customers? I know we've talked about the data challenges, but and analysis paralysis. But is there anything outside of that you're hearing, just from the design perspective, going into a new way of working and approaching a new format and infrastructure for office design? We've all kind of seen trends of shifting from the me space to the we space. Are there other frameworks that you're sharing with customers that are useful?
We hear a lot of, we contextualize it into kind of work, worker, and workplace, right? So I think you have to start with, and what a lot of our customers are asking are, and a lot of things we're experiencing ourselves, quite frankly, because I don't know that we're too dissimilar from some of our customers, is who are the people that need to do the work? What type of work are they doing? And what type of an environment is best for them to do that in? And so I think what a lot of customers are asking is, how do I solve for different types of workers based on the work that they're doing, and create the right space for that work to be done? When the pandemic hit, just about every tech company in the Bay Area sent a desk and a chair and a light home with their people, and said, we'll tell you when we're ready to come back. And now a lot of them are forcing mandates to say, you have to come back to another ergonomic chair that looks very similar to the one we just sent you at home, and the desk that we sent you at home. And now we want you to come do that in our real estate. And I think best in class customers are starting to think more, they're starting to think more multi-level in the way that they address their workplace to say, what is it that we actually want our people to come together for? How do we support the type of work that needs to be done together collectively? What type of work does not get done very well in an individual basis? Because effectively, the pandemic taught us that we actually could do work from home. The quality of that work, I think, is can be questioned. The experience when the work is being done, I think, can be questioned. We saw spikes in loneliness and that kind of thing. But a lot of our customers are saying, are just asking the question, how do we create the right environments for the right type of work, and then identify the people doing that work to make sure that we're driving efficiency?
Yeah, another question just around furniture is we've seen some really cool fit outs and new furniture settings, and honestly, completely new furniture types. And that has technology embedded in it. Table shapes are changing just to accommodate more collaboration. And how much are you seeing adoption of that type of new fit out and new layouts within your clients' adoption?
Yeah, I'd say relative to conference rooms, dramatic differences. I think, and Chris could speak more to the technology side of it. He probably forgets more about technology than I know, but I think when you start to see the sound fidelity in conference rooms, because there are people coming into meetings from various different locations, and making sure that the experience for everybody for each individual is the same, and ocular type tables that have really large displays that maybe are different ratios than what we saw before. We're seeing fewer of the long, skinny conference tables with displays on one end, and more turning the direction of the room, potentially having fewer people in the room, but it's a better experience for everybody involved. We definitely see the need to have quick and rapidly reconfigurable spaces. So, space types that need to do a lot of different types of things throughout the course of the day. Very few parts of the floor plate, or the parts of the floor plate that are getting reconfigured a lot, are spaces that only did one use type before and now need to do multiple use types. So the furniture needs to be movable, the tech needs to be movable, the whiteboards need to be movable, and they need to come through the lens of, we may have multimodal people showing up within the meeting, people live, people remote, people in conference rooms, people from their homes, and being able to have that similar experience and participate is or a lot of the trends that we're seeing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
very
interesting. I
cool.
think a big part of answering that question is understanding where we are in the overall phase and process post-COVID, right? There's this idea now currently that's somewhat antiquated, that we're still somehow in the new normal. I would argue that we've graduated beyond the new normal and now we're just in a state of normal. I'm going to coin a phrase that a colleague of mine used in a discussion she and I were having with current trends in the market around technology. And what she said was somewhat humorous, but also, I think, pretty pointed in that she said, in tech, there's always three stages that you're in. You're either in trauma, drama, or Dalai Lama. She said, and right now, when it comes to post COVID, we're in the state of Dalai Lama. We're in a state of trying to understand what tools to provision our resources with. Look, we've resigned ourselves and agreed that, hey, the new state is you're going to spend a percentage of your work life in the office and a percentage in a third location, whether it's your home office or some disparate location elsewhere. We understand that. And then we went through this period of drama after that initial trauma of COVID, of trying everything out. Hey, maybe the front of wall solution isn't the way to go. Maybe wide tables, long tables, short tables, high tables. And everyone went through this mad scramble to be the first to market with the solution. Now, again,
Yeah.
we're in this state of peace where okay, we've now understand that we're in this perpetual state. Now let's start to evaluate really what's worked. Let's go through another exercise with analytics softwares and the like to really understand what value we're bringing to our resources, both external and internal, and then start to put playbooks, revised playbooks, and a set of standards around that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And similarly, from the technology perspective, people just trying everything out, but not knowing exactly how to grow that strategy as a strategy. And in the Dalai Lama phase, we're all taking a much more patient and calculated approach, which is fantastic because then it builds in a layer of efficiency for both sides of the market.
Right. And there's a
Um,
desire then to engage in a data analytics effort so that you have concrete data to support the decisions that you make.
mhm. Yeah, certainly. On that word efficiency, I'm curious what you think with kind of, productivity and effectiveness being really important key words right now. And I've always said that productivity is the golden nugget and this is the golden metric that everyone's trying to get to. And effectiveness is the new term associated with productivity. But it's extremely hard to quantify, extremely hard to measure. But we know that there are elements leading to it and we can start to build a model around it. But sometimes our zero as an organization really focused on energy efficiency right now. And sometimes these two are at odds with each other, particularly when we're trying to drive up occupancy, the opportunity for energy efficiency may go down. And we don't necessarily want to capitalize on just underutilized offices as a opportunity for energy efficiency. So I'm curious what you think, or trends you may be spotting in terms of organizations implementing technology for energy efficiency or just driving that as a key priority of theirs.
I'll let you
And,
take that, Chris.
generally, if there's room for energy efficiency in the conversation.
In the technology space, we understand that most enterprises have a core sustainability and or environmental stewardship strategy, right? One way, shape, or form. And most technology hardware solutions are designed to meet some base standards around, again, some of those stewardship strategies and the like, or even policy that an enterprise may have. So that said, I think there's an opportunity here for customers to really understand whether it's the amount of times or preferred days when the spaces and or conference rooms could potentially be more congested, really to understand what the people or person throughput through their individual spaces are or space types are. I think that's super important so that they can then manage their BMS solutions or building management systems to be able to turn the space off when it's not maximally used. So I
Hmm.
think there's really an opportunity now to put software and hardware technologies in spaces so that we can start to gather that data and understand when we should focus on energizing or activating spaces within a building, and when maybe as simple as on a time schedule when we would may want to taper that down to X% of 100. So I think there's really an opportunity there for you to work to provide that data to support those sustainability strategies that a lot of the enterprises have.
I think from a management and leadership standpoint, there's an opportunity to be super intentional with how people come together, right? Because we're talking about building efficiency but if people don't feel connected, then there's a lot of inefficiency that happens, cultural inefficiency, there's space inefficiency. And so I think there is an opportunity to say, how do we scale up our services on the day that we intentionally want people to be here and be together? And how do we be planful about that? I know our own organization, we made some pretty intentional discussions. We said there are certain days of the week that we want all of our people to come together, not because we're trying to drive better occupancy in our spaces to justify our real estate expenditure. We are doing it because we know that having a connected organization makes a lot of sense. And so we give each business unit the ability to determine when that team or each team when that team will come together. But we have one day a week that our entire enterprise comes into the office because we know that if sales needs to be connected with finance and finance needs to be connected with HR, but what it also does is for our workplace experience teams, it allows them to be super efficient. So if they're going to dial up the experience for the day, we
Hmm.
yesterday was our day, and our AAPI group got together and showed how they were making recipes that were culturally relevant to that ERG. And we're doing lamb chops in our cafe area, which are some of the best lamb chops I've ever had, by the way. But it drove great engagement, right? And so our workplace experience team, our facilities team, our HR teams, all of our teams knew that that's a day. And so Monday and Friday, probably going to be a little quiet around there. And so we're able to get building efficiencies and knowing which parts of the building that maybe we don't have to activate as much. Our workplace experience teams don't have to put as much effort and cost into the days when they know people aren't going to be there. But when we know people are going to be there, let's really dial it up and create an experience that helps maximize the efficiency of the building. But also in the days when it's not being utilized, we can pull that back and get some cost savings as well.
I love that. That's perfectly in line with what we're seeing, and it allows companies to balance this concept of productivity, effectiveness with other initiatives around sustainability and ESG reporting. And just a comment on a conversation I had earlier today with an account. They were measuring air quality really as a way to dial up on the productivity element to make sure that they're not compromising health, safety, but also cognitive function in conference rooms and other spaces. But then wanting to layer on the technology for the energy efficiency. And sometimes it's the other way around, but seeing that those need to be in balance and they need to be implemented together so that we can chomp away at both of those opportunities at the same time. So we have just a few more minutes. We're going to ask all of you in the room here with us around our fireside. If you have any questions, please pop those into the Q&A or the chat. We're happy to answer any of those. We do have one here from Jim asking about the traditional cubes from the mid 2000s. These are open spaces created from spontaneous conversations, but also more noise across the floor. This may have driven workers into phone rooms for calls. Post-pandemic, do you see a rise or decline in the percentage of phone booths per full-time employee? That's
Yeah, that's
certainly a metric that I would
I
expect you to have.
yeah, it would come as no shock to know that prior to the pandemic, there were only a handful of companies that made phone booths, and post-pandemic, just about everybody makes phone booths. And in fact, here in the next month or so, a couple of weeks, the Detroit Auto Show of office furniture happens in Chicago, and every year, just everybody comes out with a new, different version of it. So I would say definitely an increase. I think if there was a bell curve, it definitely probably spiked. They're still in high demand. I would say the thing that changes before it was just having private spaces that provided some level of acoustic privacy. The thing that's really becoming the driver in that space with phone booths is the level of acoustics that each phone booth provides. And so you can get into a space divisional phone cube, which is a more efficient small conference room. But if you want noise privacy, you're going to have to make some investment into getting into something.
Mm,
And then some of them are really starting to drive more integrated technology solutions into the booth themselves.
mhm,
The employee doesn't have to just bring their own technology now. They can go directly into the booth. The booth has built-in technology. You can dial into the Zoom, Teams, Google Meets, whatever, and it's all fully on board and ready to go with the audio piped in and a lot more lighting options to create better lighting appearance for the person that's joining maybe into a remote meeting. So I think we've seen an increase in the number of booths, but also an increase in the fidelity of the booth itself and how it shows up. The biggest challenge with booths, though, are state and local codes. And so if you're going to put in a phone booth over a certain size, and you got to bring sprinkling, and you got to have strobes, and you got to have all kinds of stuff to it, it almost becomes cost prohibitive to
yep,
have them. And even within the same city, sometimes it's tough. The Bay Area is tough. Mountain View will be different than Palo Alto, and depends on which part of the city you're going to be in and who's the inspector, and it drives a lot of chaos a little bit, but we're definitely seeing an increase in them.
yeah, that's such an interesting point. The we've been tracking that news as well, just around mandates in San Francisco requiring more from an inspection perspective. And interestingly, in the data, what I highlighted at the beginning is we saw a spike of difference in 40% utilization across phone rooms roughly around 2022 into 2023, because there was just this friction between coming to the office, but then still needing a lot of private space because you've created a culture around virtual collaboration. But really interesting. I've seen some of those brochures on the higher quality spaces with lighting and technology, and that's great great example of technology integrated into the furniture in your offering. All right, so last question here. We can go over just a couple minutes. Are there any myths around creating effective spaces that need to be debusted?
Well, I would probably answer the question more so around provisioning the data to support some of those decisions, right? One of the arguments around going through a space analytics effort is it's expensive. It takes too much time. There's a heavy investment on infrastructure that's required. I think a lot of that is perceptive. You take our Zero as an example because it's an ever evolving offering in the market. It's a completely wireless solution. Did you know that your spend on infrastructure is down X% over what the experience used to be? You also have rapid deployment because it's a wireless technology at this point. Were we aware of that? There's some innovation around how things are mounted where you don't actually have to pull out a screw gun and go through this long exercise with a full team of resources. Rather, you can have one with a ladder, go out on site and easily install 10 to 20 sensors in a space, right? So I think that's one of the myths out there. The other one is it's not worth the investment, right? This is a short-term strategy, and the upfront investment again is so high that we don't know if the outcome is essentially worth it. These sensors are designed to stay in place so that you can start to gather the data initially for your strategic focus on your playbook design, but also there to stay throughout the course of the EOL cycle of any given space out on site, so that you could take advantage of the feedback that you get over a longer duration and continue to hone your strategic playbooks and the like. And then one of the biggest myths I hear out there is somehow it's going to compromise your network, that it's high risk. And I would argue the fact that a lot of these technologies now have made just about every whitelist out there in just about every vertical and have extreme compliance requirements that they have to meet and have met and have documented said compliance such that it's available to CISOs and or security officers and the like.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris, because that's a great plug to why we're working together, and we need to continually educate because technology evolves rapidly, and experience you may have had 4 years ago does not apply today because of Moore's law.
Absolutely.
Dave, anything to contribute to the myth subject?
Yeah, I think the myth that all work can be done from anywhere is a bit of a myth. I think we felt like there was a lot of work that could be done from anywhere, which would then say the office is an archaic artifact of the past. I think there still is very much a relevance of creating spaces that where people come together and create meaningful engagement. And I think that this idea that people are just as effective on their own, at home, alone, and not engaged with their colleagues, and that being just as effective as going into the physical space is just not true. I think there are definitely use cases where people being able to find some balance and work from home and be able to get heads down work done is absolutely there's a case for that. And I think there's a use for that. But I think this idea that the office is just not as relevant as it used to be is just different. It's going to force us to have to think more creatively and more critically, and it's going to force us to have better leadership teams because leading teams, I think probably the biggest, and this is hopefully not going to be too much of a rabbit trail, but I think when there was the race for talent and you were just hiring anybody who could fog a mirror because you needed to get people on board and doing jobs, the need to lead in that kind of an environment was just not leadership skills took a back seat. And so you have a
Mm.
lot of organizations that were lead by management, and it's just managing talent, managing real estate, managing data, and managing metrics, and not actually leading people and giving them a reason to come in and be engaged in their work fell by the wayside. And I think now we're going through a phase where being intentional about how people come together and creating the spaces where those people come together and then measuring them in real time to know that those spaces are actually doing what they need to do and doing the hard work for that is really critical. We're having a lot of conversations about not just doing QBRs with our customers and talking about how much did you buy, where did you buy, what did you buy. We're starting to have conversations with them about quarterly performance reviews, which is sitting down and not talking about the stuff that they bought and not talking about where that they bought it, but really talking about how is their space being utilized and what changes do we need to make in real time using data like R0 to know that, because by the time a customer realizes that their space isn't working, it stopped working a long time ago, right? By the time you
Mhm.
realize you
Yeah,
have
totally.
cancer, that's a little too far gone. Like, you had cancer a long time ago. The goal is to identify the cancer early, and the cancer for real estate is underutilized space. So the quicker you can
Mhm.
understand what spaces are not being utilized, quickly address those, make them into spaces that are high performing spaces, the greater engagement, the greater performance you're going to get, and the greater health of the real estate portfolio, but also the culture, because that's really important piece.
Yes. Such a great parallel to preventative health, preventative maintenance,
Exactly.
preventative measurement. Yeah.
Mhm.
And enabling those experiences like your lamb chop lunch with live real-time data to say, hey, all of your staff is down there. Why don't you go and join your colleagues?
I'm pretty
Um,
sure that if most workplace teams did lamb chops on Tuesday, your space would be full, especially if
I
you
am
use.
there.
You guys can't have our guy Francis though. Like, he's our guy. You can't have him, but he's amazing chef.
All right. You just have to invite me on a Tuesday, okay?
Send.
Yeah.
Send. Done. All right. Chris, Dave, it's been really fun getting warm by the fireside with you. And thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
All right. We'll see everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the other side.